Ever since his emergence into the platforming genre in Super Mario World, Mario's prehistoric pal Yoshi has gone on to become the face of his very own series under the title of Yoshi's Island. While the original game was labeled as a sequel to Super Mario World, its far different style prompted it to soon branch out and become the first installment in the independent series known today. The green reptile was granted some slight spin-offs as well, such as Yoshi's Story, Yoshi Touch and Go, and Yoshi Topsy-Turvy, but the bulk of his adventures lie within the Yoshi's Island titles. Yoshi's Island was a phenomenal start to a newly born series, laying the new familiar foundation of quirky characters and charming art styles for its numerous sequels, one of which is Yoshi's Island DS, which, while in my opinion is worse than the original, was by no means a bad game. What followed, however, was Yoshi's New Island, which is considered by many to be the worst of the bunch, and even one of the worst officially licensed Nintendo platformers out there. At this point, the series, while certainly not dead, had been in a state of decline, with no individual release coming very close to the quality of the original. That is, until Yoshi's Woolly World, easily my favorite game in the series, released on the Wii U in 2015. This cutely crafted title by Goodfeel was in my eyes near perfect in its level design, OST, charm, gameplay, and everything else. The game was full of charm from start to finish, with each new level feeling unique. And not just because they have one-time use throwaway gimmicks like many other games, but because they're all designed with a clear passion. Every level flows so seamlessly, even when they're laid out like a confusing maze. And every design aspect so perfectly complements them to create a calming, lighthearted, and enjoyable experience. Naturally, with Woolly World steering the series back on track, one would think that Nintendo would continue in the right direction with their next release, Yoshi's Crafted World. And for a while, it seemed like they were. Leading up to its release, trailers were gradually unveiled, portraying the game as a worthy successor to Woolly World. It still had a fun, creative art style, and its gameplay appeared relatively similar to that of Woolly World's, with some interesting looking adjustments, and being once again developed by Goodfeel, it truly seemed as though Crafted World would be the next best game in the Yoshi's Island series. But something went horribly wrong. It simply wasn't. I began Crafted World with my expectations somewhere slightly above perfectly adequate. The reason for this being that after seeing some preview gameplay in the game's opening, it appeared less enjoyable than I originally thought, though still potentially salvageable. Yet upon playing through the first few levels, I found that unlike Woolly World, which was so enjoyable that it felt like it flew by in seconds and I was left craving more, Crafted World was already beginning to tire me. Playing it felt like a slow trudge through a thick swamp, which struck me as very odd considering that the gameplay remained relatively unchanged. Sure, splitting trails and flipped levels didn't exist in Woolly World, and neither did three-dimensional egg throws, but one would think that these changes would only add to the experience, not weaken it. For the most part, the charm and creativity present within Woolly World remained as well, and one could argue that the crafted art style actually provided the space for even more creative ideas. I mean, I can certainly admit that some of Crafted World's levels looked better than Woolly World's. All in all, at least at first glance, not much appeared to be changed, but boredom still managed to plague me as I reluctantly lumbered through the first few hours. And for a while, I honestly couldn't put into words why, but after cruelly abusing myself by forcibly playing more of this game, I now understand a lot of why I don't personally enjoy it. For one, while the game was indeed beautiful, the levels that contained this beauty were boring for a multitude of reasons, most having to do with the newly added mechanics which were intended to make the game more unique, and while they did succeed at doing so, it was in a negative way. One of these culprits was splitting paths. Every 2D platformer has some sort of trail to follow, naturally, as otherwise there'd be no sense of direction or progression. And Crafted World attempted to further stretch this age-old concept by adding a third dimension into a 2D game, allowing Yoshi to hop from the background to the foreground rather often, and this proved to be detrimental in a few ways on its own. Sure, it adds a layer of depth to the gameplay, literally, but with this layer of depth comes hundreds of short lulls in gameplay where Yoshi spends a few seconds transitioning from one path to another. Not to mention that the paths are so thin that oftentimes the player will attempt to walk onto one and miss entirely. Sure, it's a minor thing, but I feel that with the game's already apparent slow pace, it only worsens the experience that much more. Another new mechanic that also tainted the game was the ability to throw eggs into both the foreground and background. Noticing any trends? Once again, the developers broke through the two-dimensional wall in an attempt at making the game more immersive, creative, or whatever they were going for, and once again, they only made things worse. Just as was the case with the three-dimensional level traversing, the three-dimensional egg throwing drastically slowed progress. Sure, some of its uses were clever, but in the common chance that they weren't, they just felt like a burden above all else. Drawing your egg only to slowly center your shot and sometimes miss only to do it again was horrible. And this is one of the main premises of Yoshi's Island. The thing is, in the other games, the cursor swiftly slides up and down, providing a fast, satisfying shot if you can time it right. If you can't, well, boo-hoo, you get another shot and it's no big deal, but if you can nail a throw from across the screen despite the rapid movement of the cursor, it feels great. Crafted World gets rid of that in favor of a slow, self-controlled cursor. It covers the range of the entire screen, which definitely adds to your throwing options, but with those extra options comes multiple wasted seconds per throw trying to get your aim right, which can add up over the course of an entire game. And if you're on the curious side like me, you'll want to uncover everything you can, which means that every bush, house, cow, box, and whatever else crammed into these levels must be hit with an egg. Eventually, I gave up and just started speeding through levels trying to find any sort of salvation for this game, but salvation I did not find. For the ones with completionist goals, I am truly sorry. Not only will you have to comb every corner of these levels, but every side of them too. What am I talking about? After every level, or maybe just certain levels, I'll be honest, I don't even know since I only did it the first time the option was presented to me and never again, you're given the option to go back through the same exact level, but flipped. Not like Flipside, where characters have their own flipped counterparts, not like Mario Kart's Mirror Mode, where the tracks being flipped actually proves to be a challenge. They're just flipped. Nothing new other than more collectibles, more to throw eggs at, and more dead brain cells. I like music. I love music when it fits with the section or area of a game in which it's being played. In that sense, I should adore Crafted World's soundtrack, right? It's all cutesy, lighthearted, and upbeat, just like the levels. Judging by what I just said, it's only logical that I enjoy this game's OST. Or I would, if it weren't 20 remixes of the title theme. It's getting old. Me comparing this game to Woolly World, I mean, but I simply have to drive this point home. Yoshi's Woolly World has such a fantastic OST with so much variety within the tracks. In Crafted Worlds, at least as far as I got into it, is essentially filled with title theme after title theme after title theme. Because of these reasons, as much as I hate to add to this handful of games, Yoshi's Crafted World is just one game I could not force myself to beat. It simply would have been a waste of my time. It's very strange though, how a game so fundamentally similar to its amazing predecessor could prove to be so disappointing. Innovation very often drives the video game market. Seldom do people want to play the same game twice. This is evident in the increasing levels of hatred towards the new Super Mario Bros. Series. While they're still selling well, more and more people are getting tired of more of the same. This is why sequels almost always contain at least one new major gimmick, as a way to distinguish themselves from the games that came before them. It just so happens that many of Crafted World's defining gimmicks caused the game's downfall. One of my favorite aspects of Woolly World was all the creative Yoshi designs you could choose to play as, but even Crafted World's replacement for this just didn't have the same charm. I understand that I simply may not be part of the game's target audience, but for a game that followed the release of Yoshi's Woolly World and the reveal of Metroid Prime 4, I simply couldn't help but expect more. I don't typically like being negative, and when I am, I do my best to at least end on a positive note. So, while the Yoshi's Island series has had its share of ups and downs, what series hasn't? Xenoblade excluded, of course. The original was great, DS was passable, New was subpar, Woolly was exceptional, and Crafted was unplayable. Overall, I'd say it averages out. I'm not trying to send this series to its grave, I truly believe Yoshi's next adventure could be a fantastic one. Good Feel made both Woolly World and Epic Yarn two of my favorite platformers, and I don't doubt that they can do it again. So while Yoshi's Crafted World was a very disappointing game in my eyes, it has its fans, and I can accept that it wasn't my game and remain hopeful for the future of the franchise. Thank you all for watching, and I'm sorry if you're a fan of this game. Your opinion is just as valid as mine.